So here we are again. Today's the 10th of May 2015, and in this video I'd like to make 2 points so that the sample Celtic Cross spread that I do next is going to make more sense, although the suggestions that I'm going to make can be applied to any tarot spread at any time. And the first point, the first point is going to be about understanding what we mean by the future, and this point applies to readers as well as to the questioner, so that readers have a particular idea about what's involved with the future card, especially if you're having trouble connecting what's going on now with what is shown for the future. And the second point is about what we can expect, what we should expect from a reading, because sometimes readings don't go well, and you may know that. And there can be good reasons why readings don't go well that have nothing to do with the reader and his or her ability. And I think it's useful to know or to have some ideas about the question and the questioner and the reading itself, so we don't overreact if things don't go well. First, though, about the future. So there are good reasons for having a plan, right, for the future, or for setting goals, in part because if you have a goal, then there's a better chance that you're going to get somewhere. Somebody said, if there's no goal, you can't score. Okay, so usually with goal setting and plan making, we start from where we are, from our current situation, and we come up with where we would like to be. And this can work well, but it can also mean that in a way we're starting inside a box of certain situations, so to speak, or we're beginning with particular concerns. Then we work out from or away from that point, and we can end up in a nice place because the problems are solved or the situation's better. But even though it's a better situation, that it may not be a place that excites us or makes us want to produce more. Because if the starting point isn't quite right, or if we're not quite right at the moment of making the plan, then the odds are that the goal that we set isn't going to be quite right either. So we can imagine a future, but in some ways it's really just a continuation of the present, right? Because what we select for the future is based on what's going on at the moment. So it's a bit like a projection. You're here and you project into the future, but it's a projection of our current situation. And so what we project into the future may not actually be what we want. So, okay, so things can happen where in life where you end up doing something very different from what you expected. So I once found myself living in Bath, again, in the south of England. And I wasn't sure what to do when I got back there. So I thought, okay, I'll get a job and I'll save some money. And then over the next few months, I'll figure out what it is that I want to do. So I got a job in a restaurant. And I was going to stay there and save. And later I would be able to do what I wanted because I would have the cash in hand to go and do it. Then one night, 2 Dutch women walked into the restaurant. I got chatting to, especially to one of them. And a week later, right, I was living in Holland again, in a town called Haarlem. I was there for a few days, and then we moved to Amsterdam. Actually to Beethovenstraat, which is in a nice part of the town. So this was a sudden and unexpected move, and it was not part of my plan. And it was not something I'd been thinking about, because my plan had been to stay in Bath and save some money. And it seemed a sensible enough plan, but something else came up, the meeting, and I took off. So this is what actually happened in my future, or what was going to happen in my future. So with the future, you might get, let's say you have an ace card in the present position and the 6 of batons, or the sun, or the 3 of cups in the future. So we know that the new beginning shown by the ace is going to work out well, because there's victory in the 6 of batons, or the success with the sun, or there's a reason to celebrate with the 3 of cups. And sometimes the future is a kind of logical progression from the present situation. So let's say you had made a plan and you've got the ace and then one of those 3 cards. If you made a plan, it's going to be a good one. And it makes sense. It's going to take you in the direction you want to go in. right? Because of the 3 cards that came out, or the 3 samples that I gave. Okay, and that's sort of a logical connection between the present and the future. Sometimes, though, you get a card for the future and you're not quite clear in your own mind, the reader isn't, about how to read the future card or cards, or how they connect with or relate to the present. So if you find yourself in a situation like that, what you can do is start with the future card and figure out how to get back to the present. So it's the reverse order from what we would normally think. So with me back in Bath, I could have got a card, if I'd gone to a reader, let's say, I could have got a card showing a new beginning in a foreign country. And we could then have thought of 1 or 2 ways that it could have come about. And what's important is it's not so much getting the details exact and right, but giving the questioner an idea about the future so they can be ready. And so they can recognize what's going to happen and be able to take advantage of it once it comes along. So let's say you find the Judgment card in the future. And this card shows somebody being awakened, right? Or getting a call to act, or and at the same time being freed from a confined situation because the people are in coffins and the lids are now open. So the questioner might find it hard to believe that the future is going to be like that, or they just don't see it, for whatever reason. And if you start with the present situation and try to move it forward, you don't get very far because the questioner doesn't really believe it. So what you do instead is you start with the Judgment card and you paint a picture of what it shows. And so you just talk about it. And sometimes you find that you naturally and automatically talk about what's actually going to happen. Or you talk about what could happen. And that can open the questioner's mind to new possibilities. So with Judgment in the future, somebody might be about to start a new job and you find Judgment in the future. So this new job is going to turn into something very different, right? Because, okay, so maybe you talk about how this card, the Judgment card, can show expansion and development into something fulfilling. And you might give an example of somebody, let's say they're doing general work in an art gallery, but over time they're dealing with different types of people, with artists and administrators and so on. And maybe they're going to get the idea that they can paint as well. Or maybe they've seen what the gallery represents and think, I could do as well as that. Or they're inspired to make art. Then take the idea seriously, because they can find that the gallery will later represent them and sell the work they do. So that particular example of starting in a gallery and ending up being represented by it, it may not apply to the questioner directly, but you can see from the example how developments can take place and how progress can be made. And so the questioner leaves with that possibility in mind, and it frees them to be able to react if opportunities come up, or maybe it makes them more desirous of having opportunities. And that sort of sets the ball rolling for them. Because it's easy to think of the future as following on from the present. But inventors, for instance, sometimes imagine their invention in a moment or see it in a dream. And what they do is they see the completed invention and then they figure out a way back from the invention to the present situation. And that gives them the steps in reverse order that they need to take to bring their invention to reality. So sometimes it makes sense to work backwards from the future to the present and see how to get there. So that's something about the future. The second point is about the questioner. And the thing is, some people have their minds made up before the reading. So they come and they ask questions, but really they're looking for confirmation rather than new insight. So they may have some plan that they think is fabulous and wonderful, and they're sure it's going to work out. And they just want to hear that everything is going to be fine and they were right, even if the plan isn't much good, or even if it's got a fatal flaw or two. And you can also get the opposite kind of situation where the person is convinced they're going to fail no matter what, and there's nothing they can do to prevent it. right? So if you're dealing with somebody like that, how much can the reader really talk to them about making changes or adapting their behavior to get a better result? Not much. Because it's a bit like with both cases, both extremes, it's a bit like there's a barrier between the spread and the questioner. And so the reader might think, this is pointless. Why am I even bothering to go through the spread? Because I know I'm not going to get anywhere with this person, because I'm up against a mind that's made up one way or the other. And sometimes people are having a reading to keep somebody else happy. They think, or maybe they even say, I don't really believe in any of this, but my husband or wife or whoever thinks it's a good idea, so I'm doing them a favor. If you're dealing with somebody like that, what can you do? They may not even tell you this before the reading, but the reader's up against it before they even start. And there are other types of reasons as well that a reading can go badly, or you can struggle to get the reading off the ground. And I'd like to suggest an approach that's useful when people are uncooperative, as well as being a good starting point when people come into the reading with fixed ideas about what's possible or what's going to happen. And what you do is you ask the questioner to pick a number between 1 and 9 and tell you which one. You then ask for another number between 0 and 22. You can see where I'm going with this, I'm sure. So the questioner may not consciously know the symbolism of the numbers, but I think some part of them does. And so the reader can then make something of the numbers chosen and relate them to the questioner's life and future. Because we know there are 22 major trumps, right? So the first number that they choose is one of the major trumps between the magician and the hermit. And the second number chosen, we've got 0 as the fool and 22 as the fool. So you've got a second major trump to talk about, or to use one or both of them to point the questioner in the right direction. You can explain as much or as little as you want about the choosing of the numbers and what it means, but the numbers that are chosen are important for the questioner when you talk about what they're doing or what they chose, what's going on in their life, what's going on with them right now and into the future based on the numbers that they chose. And so based on the cards that they chose via the numbers. So you, as a reader, already know something about the major trump that goes with the number. So what you do is you talk about each card individually and in combination, and you put some kind of story together. And this can also be one reason for reading about the major trumps. So you're reading not so you can learn apparent meanings, but you're reading in order to give yourself ideas about what you might say if somebody chooses a particular number. So you read what people say about, let's say, the Chariot, and you imagine somebody picking the number 7, and you're thinking, okay, this is what the Chariot is about. What kind of points would I make if the questioner chose the number 7? What kind of points would I make to them about their current and future situation based on the Chariot card that shows movement, or maybe a long trip, or being in charge of a vehicle, or because it's a long trip, having a clear idea about what direction you're going in. So you read and you think about what you might say, and you don't have to remember all that you think so that you can use it later. But what you're doing with this exercise is you're making connections in your mind and connecting thoughts. And you'll find that you're going to remember what you need to remember when the person chooses the number. So when the questioner chooses 2 numbers in this way, and the reader uses these 2 numbers to talk about the questioner and his or her life, the questioner is going to recognize themselves, and it's going to give them a kind of overview of their life and how to live it well for the time being, or maybe for always. And it's also going to give you a background against which to do the reading. So it's useful to know what kind of shape you're in, because depending on the shape you're in, some things will come easily and other things will be more difficult. So if you're in an awkward situation for the numbers that you chose and you want to do something, you know you're going to have to make an extra effort. But if you choose, let's call them good numbers, or numbers showing success and forward movement, and you want to go and do big things, then it's going to come much more easily. So somebody might choose the number 9, and we know that 9 is the hermit. So we just start talking about the hermit and what it shows, and trust ourselves that we're going to make various points that are important for the questioner to hear. So we might say that the hermit is a kind of loner. So you need time on your own so that you can relax and go over what you've been going through, and just figure out what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of that doesn't belong to you. And this can be a general rule for a few months. So make sure you get time alone, or it can be a specific action. So simplify your life. And this can or should be the number one priority until you get things straightened out. And maybe the reader suggests a book or a blog where the questioner can find out more about what works when people try to simplify a complicated situation, or how to go about simplifying your life, or becoming tidy, or whatever it happens to be. Or it may be that the person says, okay, I don't really have time alone because of family and friends and work. So if they choose the number 9, the reader can say, okay, when you do get 5 or 10 minutes, make the most of it and take it seriously rather than waste this precious time. So maybe the second number is 1. So when you're on your own, because you're the hermit, do something creative, because the other number 1 is the magician. Or let's say the second number is 3, right? So you're the hermit and you chose the number 3, the empress. You need other people who are going to let you, or who are going to allow you to be alone, and who won't take it personally if you don't want to spend every minute of every day with them. Because 3 is the empress, who's sociable, among other things. Or you might find yourself saying the opposite, that the other people the questioner is involved with are good and kind and friendly and worth knowing, because we've got the empress there, the number 3. So the hermit can safely leave his or her cave, right? Because hermits live in caves. And it's okay to spend time with other people in the world. So there are various possible interpretations of this and any other combination of numbers, but it's going to work. And you're going to say appropriate things if you relax. So somebody gives you the 2 numbers, relax and just talk. And if you trust yourself and trust the moment and trust the tarot, you're going to find that your intuition is going to work. But it's going to work if you don't try. Intuition stops if you try to make it work. So intuition is working all the time, except that we get in our own way when we think, and when we think we know best, or when we talk ourselves out or talk ourselves into what turns out to be a bad move. Okay, those are a couple of points about reading cards generally. And I think that getting the questioner to pick a couple of numbers before any reading is a good way to show the questioner that the tarot is actually useful, as well as it gets the questioner into harmony with their own situation. It gives them an overview and gives them an idea of the kind of shape that they're in at that time, so they can make the most of it. So that if they're in a good period, they can move forward quickly. If they're in a bad period, they can understand they need to be patient. Okay, I'm thinking that next week I'll upload the Celtic Cross sample spread. And if it turns out, I haven't done it yet, but if it turns out to be extra long and detailed, I'll make it into 2 videos. So have a good week, and I'll see you later on the 17th of May. Okay, bye-bye.